And now it's time for Power of Prophecy with your host, former professor at the University of Texas at Austin, career United States Air Force officer, and best-selling author, Tex Mars.
Hello, friends. This is Tex Mars. Welcome to another edition of Power of Prophecy, being heard around the world. You know, today's program is going to be so vital, so essential to you that I'm going to ask you right now, dear friends, if you haven't been listening to my program for a long time, and I know I have many, many faithful listeners that probably have memorized our telephone number for orders and our address by heart, but if you have not, please, right now, get you a pen or a pencil and some paper. You're going to want to write down the ordering information, because when you hear what we're going to discuss today with my guest, you're going to want to order his book. Now, I'm going to make a statement here. I believe this is the most important book at this time in our lives. Let me repeat that. This is the most important book that you will read at this moment, this era, this period in our lives. And I believe in destiny. And I believe that Dr. Henry Macko, my guest today, must also believe that there is a great guiding hand that leads each of us. And I believe that God has led Dr. Henry Macko to write this book. And he's brought this book to my attention, and I'm talking about God now, so that I would offer it to as big an audience as I can. I wish I had an even larger audience. Because, you know, this is something interesting. This book, by the way, let me just give you the title of it, and in a moment I'm going to introduce my special guest, and he is very special. I've been reading his work for a number of years now. He writes regularly for Rents.com. Articles, and they're some of the most insightful and discerning articles that you can read about culture, about society, about the way our minds are being shaped today by certain forces. The title of his book that he has written is Illuminati, the Cult That Hijacked the World. Illuminati, the Cult that hijacked the world. Now, I should not have to make a special effort to tell you this, but I'm going to go ahead and do so, because perhaps it is significant in a way. Dr. Henry Macko is a Jewish man. Now, to me, and I'm going to ask him what it means to him, he explains it exactly in the book what being a Jew means. But there are many today that ask, is this a Jewish conspiracy? And if it is a Jewish global conspiracy of the Illuminati, what does that mean? What does it mean for Gentiles? What does it mean for Jews? And, of course, there's great controversy over this. A lot of angst out there. And there are people that have picked certain groups, whether it's, the Bohemian Grove and the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, or, they pick the Vatican, the Jesuits, and there's all kinds of things out there. But I believe that Dr. Henry Macko's book actually, to use a euphemism, it nails it exactly as to what the Illuminati is. It is a cult. It is a satanic cult. Now, why is it important that a Jew has written this book? Well, I'm going to ask Dr. Macko that in just a moment. But let me express something to you, and I don't want to take any more time on this. But those of you who have listened to this radio program, or have gotten my books, my audio tapes, CDs, DVDs, and so forth, realize that we have a overruling philosophy in this ministry, Power of Prophecy. In terms of race, I believe race is important, absolutely. But listen to me very carefully. The Bible puts it very succinctly. Jesus died on the cross for each of us. In fact, the Bible says clearly, and you've heard it many times, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth shall not perish but have everlasting life. that word, whosoever, counts everybody in. Everybody in. Even if we go back to the beginning of the Bible, to Genesis, we see that Abraham was given a promise that he would be father of many nations. Many nations. We also know an interesting thing, if you just want to look at it from a genetic standpoint. Paul, the Apostle Paul, answered that very simply too. Paul, who was Jewish, he said that this is in the book of Acts in the New Testament, out of one blood, God made all the people on the face of planet Earth. So friends, to me, that sort of resolves the whole issue. Now, the reason that it's important is because there are people in this world that do not agree with God. They want to make God a racist, and they want to exalt their group. And whatever race they are, you know who they are. They can be white, they can be black, they can be Asian, they can be Jew, they can be something else. They can claim to be Anglo-Saxon, and whatever it is. They don't agree with God. Their argument is with God, and they are siding with Satan. And they are some kind of a racial supremacist where God said, whosoever will. Now, that's my sermon for the day. But I think it's important that Dr. Henry Macko has written this book because he has a perspective of race, and this book is a spiritual book. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I wish there was one Christian man that had written a book like this that I could discuss these issues with. I would enjoy it. But Dr. Macko has written it, and it is deeply spiritual. And that makes all the difference in the world, that this man has been given spiritual insight. Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world. Dr. Henry Macko, welcome to Power of Prophecy.
I'm glad to be on your show, Tex.
I hope I didn't say anything to offend you or whatever. I don't think I did I?
Not at all. Not at all.
In your book, you pretty well make clear where you stand on this racial divide. Is it okay for you to tell us about that?
I tend to feel that anything that the Illuminati is against must be pretty good, and one of the things they want to do is destroy racial identity for non-Jews.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems, racial identity is pretty good for Jews, but not too good for non-Jews.
Mm.
So that strikes me as evidence that it's that the racial identity is important component of our identity and something that should be maintained. Like, if you go to Israel, they don't have to deal with problems like diversity and mass migration. Nobody questions the Israelis' right to maintain their Jewish identity. Yet, for some reason, Europe and America are not being allowed to maintain their Christian European identity, and that doesn't seem fair to me.
When I said before that God said whosoever will, I believe God. The Bible also says God judges the nations, and as well as individuals, and He obviously then created nations, and I don't have any problem with that. There's squirrels and there's rabbits and there's deer and there's different kinds of human beings, and I agree with you. But what I was referring to, and I want to distinguish that, is that once we resolve, and in your book you say you're first a human being, second you have allegiance to your country, and then only third are you a Jew. I think you sort of rate them in that aspect. And I believe that is true. And there's nothing wrong with saying I'm a Jew and being a Jew, associating with Jews. I think the problem comes, and I agree with you. I think the cutting out of distinctions can be an evil thing in itself. But when one group suddenly says we're gods on earth, or we are collectively Christ, or we're the only, as you quoted the Israel Shamir in your book, when the Jews say, we are the mediator, Jews only are the mediator between God and man, doesn't that create a great problem?
Well, definitely, but, as you know, we have to make a distinction between Jewish leadership and the great mass of Jews. The great mass of Jews don't think of themselves as mediators between God and man. And I think the vast majority of Jews are quite alienated from Judaism and Zionism and all things Jewish. I say that more than half of Jews want nothing to do with Judaism, and that's the part of, those are the Jews that I speak for, the part that are generally quite alienated from the Jewish enterprise. They feel that it's been betrayed and taken the wrong path. So, the people we're referring to there are the certain rabbis and certain Kabbalist Jews, the leadership, the rich, the very, very rich Jews, people that are sort of pulling the strings, probably the bankers. Those are the ones that have this a sick agenda.
But Henry, isn't it true though? I'm not sure I agree with you on this. I'm not so sure it is a small minority of Jews, because it seems to me that, certainly you're Jewish and you certainly have maybe had contact with more Jews than I have. But the Jews that I have known seem to somehow have an allegiance to Israel, for example. Many of them do. And it seems to me that many Jews ask first what is better for the Jews, then they ask what is better for Canada or the United States. You haven't found that to be so? I would say in America, for example, a vast majority of Jews would vote, for example, liberal Democrat policies, just as a political party. They would also support Israel. I'm just guessing, if you ask who's right, and let's say in the Israeli-Pakistan controversy, I would say that a good 85% of American Jews would say Israel is correct. Am I wrong in that?
Right, Tex, and you meant did you say Israel, Pakistan, or you mean Israel, Iran?
No, the Palestinians. I'm sorry.
Oh, Israel.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, to me, I know many Christians who are Jews, but I only know a small handful who are not Zionist. I know only a small handful of so-called Christian Messianic Jews who put America first. They are American citizens, but they will always say, God wants us to put Israel first. The Jews are God's chosen.
Tex, what I'm really getting at here is, yes, people are manipulated. We know who owns the mass media. I'm more concerned with the manipulators, the puppet masters, rather than the manipulated people. And like I'm saying, I still believe half the Jews. You don't meet these alienated, assimilated Jews, but statistics show that half the Jews intermarry. That's a pretty strong statement, isn't it?
That is.
And, so you're essentially referring to the other half. Those are the ones that are visible, and sure, I wouldn't deny that they're pro-Israel, but then they're pro-Israel for the same reason that probably the majority of Americans are pro-Israel. They've been indoctrinated. They've only been told one side of the story for reasons you and I both know, because the media generally only tells one side of the story.
That's true. I guess the difference is, my forebears supposedly, I haven't checked my genealogy very close, Henry, but supposedly they came from Scotland. I don't run around all the time worried about the foreign policy of Scotland. I let Scotland take care of itself. I'm an American. And it seems that Jews, however, distinguish, because they somehow they get all entangled in all of this Israeli stuff, so that basically many begin to have a dual allegiance, and then finally they end up with only a single allegiance, and that's basically whatever's good for Israel is good for America. And that's all I was talking about. Now, your book.
Yeah, well, I can't justify that behavior.